Story 1. One time on a first date, this man was boasting about his money and how good he was at everything. I said, "Wow, and you are humble too." He immediately stopped talking. Story 2. A former boss told a story about two brothers who together owned a large car rental franchise. My boss had gone on a business trip and took the two brothers out to dinner. On the drive to the restaurant, one of the brothers started talking about the new Rolex he had just purchased. He talked for a few minutes, showing it off. After a while, his brother, who was in the back seat, leaned forward between the seats and asked what time it was. The first brother looked at his watch and said 6:30. His brother checked his own watch and said, "Funny. That's the same time my watch shows." Story 3. A guy I went to college with would say, "Cool. Not to change the subject, but I'm going to." Then he would immediately start talking about something else. I have always loved that. It is the perfect amount of snark. Bonus points if you just sound bored. Story 4. Nothing. They are doing it for attention and hate being ignored. I suppose you can respond with, "That's nice, dear," or, "Well, I hope that makes you happy." Then be on your merry way. Story 5. Hey, look at that, Abu. It's not every day you see a horse with two rear ends. Story 6. I worked with a woman who frequently boasted about how wealthy her family was. I pulled her aside and said, "That's nice, but I want you to realize that some people live in much humbler circumstances and do not feel the need to brag. Please keep it to yourself." Story 7. Simply choose not to care. It will irritate them greatly. Story 8. Looks like the next rounds are on you, mate. Let's see how many times you can get them to pay for another. It goes against my nature to dodge rounds, but I'll take a pass in this instance. Story 9. The Joseph Heller quote. Yes, but I have something he never will enough. Story 10. Once, a young businessman I knew who was doing well in telecommunications was grabbing cigars with a group of old money gentlemen. They were playing a game of poker with quarters, nickels, dimes, and pennies. The young fellow had been bragging earlier that his business was now worth $20 million. He got bored of the game and insisted the older men play with some real money. One of the men walked up with a $50 coin and asked if he was right in hearing his company's valuation. He said, "Yes, $20 million. The older businessman responded, "I'll flip you for it. If someone is bragging about their money, they are new to the game." Story 11. People who really have money often downplay it because they are worried about who might exploit them. Those who flaunt it are usually new money and often in debt. To clarify, the original poster asks how to deal with someone who rubs their nose in the fact that they make less money. This comment addresses that narrow context. This response does not imply that old money is better than new money. Many self-made people are not tacky about their wealth, and many people born into money have objectionable traits, which are usually other faults rather than this one. To rephrase the intended meaning, there is a classic remark recounted in Hit and Run, How John Peters and Peter Guber Took Sony for a Ride in Hollywood, by Nancy Griffin and Kim Masters. John Peters was a self-made Hollywood producer who started his career as a hairdresser and became a senior executive at Sony Pictures. His climb could have been admirable if he were not a terrible boss. During one of his workplace screaming fits, he shouted at a subordinate, "Peters, I am worth $100 million. What have you got?" Subordinate, "I have self-respect." Story 12. To respond, I first need to do a little bit of storytelling to provide some context. One day, I went to an amusement park in Spain called PortAventura. In this park, like in most, there is the regular entrance and then there is the VIP entrance, whose main advantage is that you do not have to wait in line to get on the rides. Anyway, my boyfriend and I had the regular tickets, and after waiting in line for about half an hour, we finally got onto the ride. Just as we were passing through the security gate to get into the ride cars, a 40-year-old man came running out of the corner and got into the front car. He looked at us and showed off the wristband for the VIP people and said, "Sorry, we who have money go first. I have over $1 million in the bank. That is what you get." At that moment, my boyfriend gave the best response I have heard to someone like that. He said, "You may have a lot of money and whatever you want, but you and I are in the same place, but you are alone and I am not." I think that is the best response not only for what it says, but for the meaning behind it. A person can be so poor that they only have money. Story 13. Ask them who they were talking to. This usually stops them from talking. Story 14. All that money and you still cannot afford a personality? Story 15. Would not mean anything to me. I have been in situations with billionaires, and I have turned them down. My response would be, if money made you satisfied, then you would not seek validation for having it. Story 16. Someone who is flaunting it is doing so because they want attention and accolades. You should channel your inner Patrick Bateman and simply respond with, "Wow, very impressive." Then move on and change the subject. The better you channel your inner, "I don't give a damn," the worse it hurts for the person hearing it, because they clearly crave your approval. Story 17. You give them literally no attention. Do not tell them that you do not care. Show them that you do not care. Story 18. Sounds like that is the only thing you have going for you. I said something along those lines to a man who always tried to get with me by flaunting his money. So gross. I just looked at him with disgust when I said it, and he walked away. Story 19. I'm not impressed by how much money they make. It's what they do with it that matters. Wow. You must be able to support many charities with that kind of money. Who are you supporting at the moment? I'd love to follow the project and see how it goes. Maybe start telling them about a great animal rescue near me that could use some donations or some medical research. That attitude is like kryptonite for people who brag about money. Story 20. I serviced some phones back in 2007 to help out with a small shop by tracing lines and labeling. Years later, a mutual acquaintance told me he said he is making more money than he will ever see in his life. My immediate response was, tell him he needs to pay his $120 invoice before running his mouth. And then I laughed because I did not care. That is why. Story 21. Feel sorry for those who tie their self-worth to money. They probably have little else to offer. Story 22. I work in education with elementary students, so you can imagine the amount of attention-seeking behaviors I encounter in a single workday. The best response to these kinds of comments is simply saying, okay, and moving on to a different subject. Do not allow them the space or opportunity to continue. Story 23. I disagree with many of the comments here. In my opinion, if someone is bragging about something they believe is objectively great about themselves, you should never refute or challenge them immediately, as you are only reinforcing their point in their mind. Often, they are bragging to draw a reaction anyway. I think it is much more effective to simply ignore their comments and move the conversation on. It is the best way to show you have no interest or a different perspective, without being awkward about causing offense. This may cause them to double down, which, if you ignore again, starts to make them look foolish. Story 24. Whenever I see people flashing a lot of cash, I assume that is all the money they have, and probably the most they have had in a long time or possibly ever. People who are truly wealthy simply use a bank. Story 25. The best action for all parties involved is to not react, avoid mentioning it to anyone, and show complete disinterest. They are actively seeking a response, so offering none is the only way to send a clear message. Story 26. It is not a perfect answer, but I saw a humorous bell curve that measured the cars people drive by wealth. At the poorest end of the spectrum was the Honda Accord. As wealth increased, it was the Mercedes-Benz, Audi, and Tesla. Then, among the ultra-rich, it went back to the Honda Accord. Story 27. Good to know and give the most suspicious look you can. Story 28. I would probably ask what they were planning to use it for and try to have a conversation about what they named. Story 29. I work in luxury sales, and I often encounter people who believe that having money allows them to jump to the top of the list for low production, high demand items. This is an inconsiderate approach, and I do not appreciate it. My response is, yeah, everyone has money these days, said in a matter-of-fact tone. I use this because it is not rude. It is a general statement that removes the sense of entitlement they think makes them special. I never sell anything to people who behave this way. Story 30. This works especially if their job is unethical, but saying, wow, my morals cost a lot more than that. But good on you, I guess they need someone to do it. Story 31. I love that for you. Or the Southern equivalent, Bless your heart. Actually, I think it is that one. Story 32. First, be sure they are flaunting. Many people think having money makes them better than others. The best response is to ignore it completely and act unimpressed. Then exit the conversation at your earliest convenience. Some people boast about money because they never had any before, and now it is a big accomplishment for them. In that case, they need to be affirmed or congratulated for their success, then told something like, I am happy for you, but bragging or talking about money makes you look bad. Story 33. I make sure to push people like this out of my life. It is very uncomfortable. Story 34. I work in a casino. Whenever I hear someone mention how much money they have, I look up their lifetime losses. Most of the time, it makes me feel better. Story 35. Very impressive. Good for you. Story 36. Here is a more positive idea. If they are truly making good money, ask them how they do it. If they are willing to share legitimate advice and even willing to help you along, it can benefit you. Story 37. My coworker had a great story about an entitled customer. The customer had a minor problem and was unhappy that we couldn't send a technician until the next day. He called my coworker the sales executive for his account. The customer said, 9 Bike said that you won't have a technician out until tomorrow. We have 8 locations. The sales executive replied, that doesn't matter. We pride ourselves on providing the best service possible. It doesn't matter if the client is a restaurant chain with over 250 locations, a retail chain with over 500 locations, or a local florist with 1 location. Our goal is to handle all service requests within 24 hours. The customer thought he was a big account, but he was actually one of our smaller ones. The sales executive gently told him so. By the way, we prioritize service call requests for customers with more serious problems, even if they were small accounts. For example, one customer had a background music system with 1 speaker that wasn't working. Story 38. If someone broaches the subject, my go-to response is, I find discussing wealth, or a lack of it, to be extremely boorish, don't you? Story 39. My niece's irresponsible father claims to have gotten a job paying $102,000 recently. Yet I had to deliver food to them tonight, or they would not have eaten. Any naive belief I may once have had about bragging has been dispelled by this person over the last 6 years. Story 40. If they are willing to include you, it is simply a conversation topic. If they are not, the conversation is about to end. Story 41. Armed robbery always sends a strong message. Story 42. Making all that money, and you still cannot live off that paycheck. Story 43. Down south, we look around at a bystander, give a knowing nod, and say, nouveau riche, meaning, this vulgar person is new to money and does not have proper wealth training to know not to flaunt it. Meaning, they are not truly wealthy. They just have some money now. In other words, they are embarrassing themselves. Story 44. If someone asks you to guess the value of something they have or their salary, immediately give an exaggerated estimate. Story 45. Once a man in his mid-50s was flaunting his black credit card in the Department of Motor Vehicles while we were waiting for our turns. He talked about being married and seeing his side partners in their 20s and 30s. I was 30 at the time. I did not respond. He repeated, Did you hear what I said? I said, Yeah, man, that's cool. Girls in their 20s. It is not about what you say. It is about how uninterested you sound. Story 46. There was a guy on the Australian Love is Blind show who was below average height. A couple of the other men were teasing him about it, so he said, Yeah, well, I'm 10 feet tall when I sit on my wallet. He was a very cool guy. Story 47. It sounds like money is important to you. I am happy that you have it. Story 48. I work at a casino and usually hear it there. I often stay quiet and let them continue making a mistake with the money. Story 49. It was one of those reverse situations. We were a group of poor college students on a Saturday night. A friend arrived with her new friend. In the first few minutes of meeting this new friend, she began giving us advice about how we should be investing. I explained that we were all stoned and would never remember what she said. Even if we did, we would have to earn more than we spend first. She laughed. Story 50. That's great for you. That's the response you give. Then try to move the conversation in another direction. Story 51. Tell them, well, that's okay. Just keep at it and you'll get there. I was struggling to make money once too. But don't give up. This implies that their income is low and assumes they want to earn more. Story 52. Some form of the "that is crazy" filler response that is very disinterested. Cool. Nice. Story 53. The only people who talk about making money with me are my friends, and I want them to make as much as possible. Story 54. I just say, oh dang, really? That's crazy. Wow. My friend does this with everything he owns. Oh, this costs me $700. That was $5,000. Have you seen my new Rolex? He is a good guy, so I go along with it. I try my best not to flaunt. Recently, my favorite car went from being pretty worthless to a collectible type of thing. People think I am rich. I blame Instagram. Story 55. I have a good friend I play games with. His cousin often mentions that he makes nearly $400,000 a year and owns his own business. While I am genuinely happy for him and would love to make that much, sometimes it bothers me. The best response I gave him was, I bet you really know your kids. He got very upset, and I later learned from my friend that he has no involvement with his children because he is constantly working. Story 56. Use their insecurities. Well, you cannot buy happiness. Story 57. Ask them if they have anything else that makes their personality interesting. Story 58. Clearly, you have enough to give to me then. I mean, that is what all my other really wealthy friends do. Story 59. And you still could not afford a better personality? It really makes you realize money is not the most important thing out there, I suppose. Story 60. Let me borrow some of that money interest-free. Actually, you owe me money, so you are technically paying me back. Either way, I am going to need that. Story 61. Dodge son, we have Dodge son here. See, nobody cares. Story 62. Hey, you seem to be doing quite well. Can you lend me a few dollars? That will shut them up real quick. Story 63. A week? When they tell you their annual salary, then grimace a little when they say per year. Story 64. Ask for some, and if they reject, reply with, I guess you don't make that much if you can't afford charity. I normally wouldn't do this, but it's been a very expensive month. I'm in dire need of a couple $1,000s. Story 65. It does not matter. Society will value them more than you based on their ability to take rather than give. Story 66. My grandmother came into money later in life, and she was incredibly awkward when it came to flaunting it. She was also a devout Catholic, so my dad's favorite line was, and how much money does it cost to get into heaven? She would get so angry. Story 67. Sir Terry Pratchett said it best. They were so rich they could afford to live poor. Story 68. Accidentally spray them with water, and then tell them to go away. I was a dishwasher for a while. Servers would throw everything around and then complain about making only $200 tonight. You're going home with wet shoes, and next time I'm actually in the kitchen, your plates will be last. Those tips will get worse. Don't upset your dishwasher or your chef. Story 69. They are superficial and fake, just like the money they love so dearly. Story 70. If you see a person driving their fancy car like a jerk, just go up to them and say, wow, is that the new Camry or any average car? It's amazing how the base models look these days. And then walk away. Story 71. I play with my children, and my partner does not cheat on me when I am at work. Story 72. I just ignore it because the vast majority of people who flaunt money are usually in so much debt that the money they actually have is dramatically less than what I have. I used to work for Maserati North America when they were still basically detuned Ferraris but still ridiculously unreliable, and I learned that the most vocal customers were usually the poorest despite their claims that they have money. The richest people I dealt with were reserved about their finances, thoughtful, personable, and usually dressed like Jay Leno most of the time. The guys who were the most vocal about their wealth were usually leveraged to the hilt on their car loans, which I had access to. I remember guys who told everyone they were rich and had 10 to 20% interest rates on rolled over auto loans that they were hopelessly upside down on. Story 73. I just act like it is the most mundane thing ever. Oh, neat. Nice. Cool. Should be your responses. Story 74. I usually encourage it if they are being really rude about it. I will take a free drink if you want to buy it. Story 75. During my college days, a girl from our group invited a random guy she met at the gym to join us for dinner. He came and started boasting about the number of businesses his father has, how his father keeps opening new ones, how his pocket money is in tens of thousands, and how he doesn't need to study further because he is going to join his father's empire anyway. While he was flaunting his wealth, we tolerated it, but soon he began trying to put us down to elevate himself further. That's when my friend and I, who had had enough, decided to stand up to him. Whatever he threw at us, we threw back. For example, he said, "My father owns a large farmhouse where my friends and I often party." So we replied, "Oh, that's great. Good to know our new friend already has a place for us to party. Please make sure to tell your dad that catering should be top-notch. We all are food lovers." He said his dad doesn't own a catering business. So we said, "Oh, in that case, he should tell his father to dive into this business since he keeps opening new ones." One after another, we used all his flaunting against him. I ended with, "But man, I have huge respect for you. How humble you are to accept your father's help and how okay you are with not doing anything of your own in life. I just couldn't do it. If I were you, I couldn't have just accepted my father's aid for life and lived in constant fear of not upsetting the master so he doesn't stop my pocket money. I have too much pride for that. But hey, good for you." He soon walked out and we never saw him again. Story 76. They are trying to impress you, which means they care about your impression of them. Just humor them and let them. It does not cost you anything and you might gain something from it. Also known as just be nice. Story 77. If you do not know them well, I have heard the response, "Is that your salary or your assistance?" Story 78. On Xbox, when my friend Murph and I were about 14, this guy in the pregame lobby was yelling about how he was playing on a 55-inch TV, which was a much bigger deal over 10 years ago, and that he owned his house. Murph replied, "Wow, you must be rich. Go shove a golden dildo up your ass." And the guy had no answer. Story 79. Are you telling me this because you want to give me money? Story 80. Share your favorite charity's PayPal link and ask them to provide proof. Story 81. My go-to is something like, "Good for you. I hope you find happiness too," all said in an overtly cheery tone. Story 82. My uncle practically draped himself over his Bentley, gushing about how expensive it was, while his friends sat in the back seat as he drove. I told him he looked like a chauffeur who forgot his hat. I am pretty sure he still dislikes me. Story 83. Give them the response they want, but do it in the voice moms use when their kid is asking them to watch something silly. Wow, buddy. Story 84. I used to work in a gym. We had a member who was well off. He owned quite a few cars, all financed, and his own house. He would brag about earning £100,000 a year. He used to come into the gym and tell me about his new car. He would get a new one every other month and claim it was one of a limited number in the world. One day, he told me all about his new fancy car. So I asked, "Cool. Can it go the speed limit?" "Of course, and it's faster than the speed limit," he proclaimed with a smug smile. "Cool, mine also goes the speed limit. Guess yours is no faster than mine then, even with my girlfriend in it." He was hopelessly single due to his complete lack of personality. He shut up and didn't speak to me again for the rest of my time there. Story 85. You do not have to speak so softly. Poverty is not a disgrace. Story 86. What is worse is when your friend who makes $150,000 a year complains about being broke and takes 3 to 4 nice vacations a year. I do not make anywhere close to that much money. Story 87. This advice is for people dealing with someone they cannot escape from, such as a coworker or a person they live with. The best response is no response. Do not engage positively or negatively. Be indifferent and engage as little as possible. When forced to reply or acknowledge something, give neutral responses as much as you can. Any positive affirmation, including smiling, nodding, or a positive remark, will fuel their ego. That is what they want, whether it is about their expensive car or their opinions. Any negative reaction can cause conflict, which you want to avoid, or escalate the situation if the person is a narcissist. They will see it as a battle and will try to win. Avoid positive reactions because they feed the ego. Avoid negative reactions because they cause conflict. Instead, show indifference. Act as if you are not bothered and make it clear psychologically that their tactics do not work on you. Do this without engaging in verbal fights. Show that you will neither fuel their behavior nor start a conflict, and that you refuse to be an agent or flying monkey. This approach requires time and must be tailored to the individual. Dealing with such people is difficult and takes a long time to master. Without professional help, most people in these situations rarely succeed in stopping the narcissist. Start with neutrality and indifference. Over time, with professional help or credible resources, you can learn how to communicate that their tactics do not work on you and that you recognize their behavior. A neutral and indifferent response may annoy the person trying to flaunt. In some cases, such as dealing with someone you will never see again, a one-liner may be appropriate. However, most of the responses suggested here are not typical conversational behavior. Story 88. That would be much more impressive if you deserved it. Story 89. Oh, here for the comments. My partner's brother and partner do this all the time. She sold her house and does not need to work, and he regularly brags that he earns 6 figures. Yet, they still invite people over for pizzas and ask them to contribute by paying. Story 90. I like to act surprised that they would say it, followed by an unimpressed sounding, "Oh, I see." Story 91. I switched careers. My supervisor earns more money than I do. I have significantly more money invested. Last year, my investments grew more than my income. I just need to work long enough for the wealth to compound. Story 92. But are you actually happy? No, I mean really happy. That has worked in the past from personal experience. People who flaunt their money usually are not actually happy, in my opinion. Story 93. Just look at them for a minute quizzically and say, "You have a booger hanging out of your nose?" Then walk away. Story 94. To feel bad about yourself. Oh wait, best response for you or best response for them. Story 95. I was working at a bar here in Australia, and a famous artist ordered drinks. I won't say his name, but he is extremely well known and used to play in a famous band I don't know much about. Maybe not the best response, to be honest, but he pulled out a giant money clip full of cash. It was so thick with bills, I had never seen anything like it. Obviously, he was trying to impress me. I barely acknowledged him or looked at him, gave him his drinks and said, "Who's next?" to the guy right behind him. Story 96. If the first aspect of your personality you choose to display is your wealth, we have nothing to discuss. Story 97. That's nice. If it is someone close to me, I would side-eye them, wondering why they are bragging when they know I am unemployed and struggling. Story 98. Why do I need to respond to one-up them or take them down a peg? Maybe they work hard for it. Why assume they did not? It is not my problem. Maybe you should ask yourself why it bothers you so much that you feel the need to get all the support for whatever it is you are trying to do in your response. Story 99. Besides the top comment, you can always just ignore it and not say anything. Story 100. That kind of action does not merit a response, and that sort of person is not worth your time. The best thing to do is act like nobody said anything. Only people who care about that sort of thing pay attention to it. If you are insecure about the amount of money you make, that is your issue. No one else can shame you unless you allow them. Just start singing one of the countless song lyrics about how money is not everything or money cannot buy love. Better yet, walk away. Also, if someone is flaunting their wealth, do not assume it is for your benefit. Maybe that is just their personality. Story 101. My cousin is constantly complaining about the cost of all the things that he buys, and all I can think is, don't buy so much stuff you don't need. His idea of saving money is just as unwise. His method of cutting back is canceling Netflix or Disney Plus. He spends more money on coffee every other day than those subscriptions cost, yet that's his solution. If his mother-in-law wasn't wealthy and contributing a lot of money, I'm convinced he would be broke regardless of his income. Story 102. I was recently at the gym, and a man I frequently see started chatting with me. He told me he had just returned from a financial conference he was financing and mentioned that he has many prominent names in his network in the finance world. He then said they would soon fly him out to another state to visit their mansions. My response was simple: nice. This changed the dynamic of the whole conversation. Story 103. Point out in as many ways as possible how, compared to the wealthiest people in the country, they are really in the same place as you. It will infuriate them. Story 104. Someone I am close with, I just tell them I am happy for them. Someone I am not close with who is trying to show off, I usually say, cool. Can I have some? No? Okay. Why are you telling me then? Story 105. Money does not buy class, dignity, honor, or respect. Story 106. At a conference last year, someone bragged about earning just over 6 figures. He was definitely trying to flirt with me, completely unaware that I am very gay. I simply looked back at him, said that was my bonus last year, 20% exaggeration, and walked over to the bar. Story 107. Opening your mouth really wide and trying to bite the money out of their hand. Story 108. I remember when I first started making money and felt like I had to show it. Keep at it, brother. Story 109. I just keep asking them questions about their choices and wealth and encourage them enthusiastically. I might as well make it a game to entertain myself. Story 110. I only ever see people boasting online about their money, so whenever I see it, I post humorous comments and say things like, "Oh, I remember my fast food wages." Story 111. I quote the Native American proverb, "When the last tree has been cut down, the last fish caught, the last river poisoned, only then will we realize that one cannot eat money." Story 112. I knew someone who would say, "You think that's a lot of money?" 9 out of 10 times, people with real money never say anything. Story 113. From my experience, if someone is bragging about themselves, it is probably because they are not very happy with their lives or relationships. Not always, but I think it makes them feel like everything in life is great. However, they are probably broke. They make $200,000 a year, but they spend every dime and then some, so just move on. Story 114. They do not actually make that much money. I am not impressed by that. Story 115. Oh, you must be counterfeit currency because people who have genuine money don't talk about it. Story 116. What are you trying to win? Making up a remark that makes you look superior is the same type of game. If you truly do not like that cheap behavior, avoid these people instead of joining them. If someone behaves that way, my interest in them just drops. And that is it. Story 117. Ask them to buy you something like coffee, a chow, or a cookie. Suddenly, they do not have that much money on them. Story 118. With all that money, you should be able to buy yourself a personality. Story 119. It must be difficult to have that as the only positive aspect. Story 120. Wow, that is a lot. Guess when your wife divorces you, you will still have half, so that is pretty good. Story 121. A genuinely enthusiastic cool. The only times this has ever happened, the number they tell me is significantly less than I make, but I do not want them to know that. Story 122. I make $XXXX. That's great. How much do you keep? Story 123. 3 things tend to be true. First, people with money generally dislike being asked for money. Second, asking for money often makes people uncomfortable and interrupts the flow of conversation. Third, negative reinforcement can definitely work. Every time they mention how wealthy they are, just ask them if they will give you $1,000. Story 124. I have been known to say things like, "Oh, so that car is what you base your personality and worth on?" Or, "Is this the one thing you want to be known for instead of yourself as a person?" Story 125. Doesn't matter to me. People are usually nicer to me, and I am not even paying them. Story 126. Look them in the eye, smile, laugh, and and change the subject. Story 127. Is that your salary or your assistant's salary? Oh, you do not have an assistant. Story 128. I have a good friend who recently got married, and this is all she does. She throws around numbers on everything. It comes from insecurity and growing up poor. Story 129. I wait for them to make a mistake and then question how, with all their money, they could not get it right. This is more relevant in my job, which is security for a bar with a dress code. People will say, I have money to bribe you to ignore your own rules. And I reply, well, I guess you have the money to afford to dress like an adult. Story 130. Buy yourself someone who cares, and then I start talking about the Pacific Theater. Story 131. I have someone in my circle who is quite frugal compared to their income, which is likely around $1 million before taxes. They often complain randomly in the conversation about the amount they pay in taxes. They also say, we can't afford that, when they clearly can. This is kind of annoying, and I have never found a good response. They are reversing the situation by bragging but not actually living the life they could live. Well played, person from my circle. Well played. Story 132. Glad to see you have some money to buy yourself a better personality. Story 133. I have my salary written down on my hand. Have them lean in to read it, then slap them in the face. Story 134. Hey, it has been great catching up, but I need to go chat with some other people. They do not have your money, but they have great personalities and are a delight to be around. Story 135. Strong-arm robbery has caused a generation of men to hide their chains. Story 136. I ask, who are you trying to impress or prove this to, me or you? Story 137. Years ago, there was a rude person at a friend's party who arrived late. He kept bragging about how much he earned per hour working overtime on a Saturday. He talked about it for about 10 minutes. His overtime rate was less than my regular hourly rate, so I told him my regular rate loudly. That silenced him. Story 138. That's it? Usually shuts them down quickly. They do not expect that response. Story 139. When I worked at a vape shop, the Middle Eastern man who owned the company came by fairly often. Within my year there, he flaunted 3 new sports cars, even asking if I would like to come check them out. Like, dude, you were paying me $10 per hour. Story 140. My question is how so many people responded by electing the President of the United States in 2016. Story 141. Anytime someone brings up their salary while I am at work, I tell them that I do not even collect a paycheck. I just do this for fun. Story 142. Nothing. Being jealous says more about you than about them. It shows that you are just as greedy and materialistic as they are. You just do not have the money. Congratulate them and move on. You should not feel jealous when you see someone drive an expensive car or make a lot of money, since shiny objects do not bring happiness or any real benefits. Story 143. That is awesome. I am not rich, but I do have a pool. I love it, but I do not blow it up every day. Story 144. If I made that little, I would starve. Do you need a loan for a short while? Story 145. All that money and you still cannot get our genuine respect. Story 146. I do not know. I would just ignore them. Money cannot buy happiness. Lifestyle, in relation to living according to one's own morals, determines happiness. Story 147. Oh, I sort of expected more, but anyway, subject change. Story 148. I am very engaged. No way, I say. That's a lot. Tell me about it. What are your days like? I look at them with big cartoon eyes. You do all that? Then, when they are done and do not want to talk about it, I keep going. I would love to make that kind of money. Maybe you could teach me. Story 149. Back in 2016, a former boss of mine would brag about how wealthy he was and how many cars he owned. But he wouldn't service the vans on time or pay us promptly. There was always some excuse. He was dishonest. He did not pay overtime or pay the driving bonus. In Europe, if your driving job requires you to drive farther than 100 kilometers from the company, you receive a bonus. He refused to pay for vacations properly. In Europe, Every company provides paid vacation. My boss would only pay 25% and claim, "These are European Union rules." When I was sick for 1 week, he docked my pay. I had been collecting documents and information and finally sued him, but not before taking sick leave for 8 weeks with full pay. I sued him and won. He had to pay me 10,000 euros and cover the court costs. He ended up selling his Audi SQ7 to pay for all of this. I met him on the street 3 months later and told him, "Thanks for the money. I'm going to enjoy spending it." Story 150. Whatever the child amuses himself with, as long as he does not cry, simply not paying attention to such people is the best option. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.